Hi everyone, by now you guys know who I am, Ray Badal. Welcome back. This is module number 3, Culturally Responsive Pedagogy. I thank you all for your time in going through each of these modules. Today we're going to be looking at an introduction to Culturally Responsive Pedagogy and the power of student surveys. In this lesson we will cover the following topics. Number 1, the definition of culturally responsive pedagogy. And number 2, the 7 principles for culturally responsive teaching. Our learning target for today is I will be able to define culturally responsive pedagogy and explain 7 principles related to its practice in order to create a student-facing survey. What is culturally responsive pedagogy? Culturally responsive teaching is a pedagogy that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. So in other words, with culturally responsive teaching, we want to bring native language into the classroom. We want to understand the history and culture of our students. We want family involvement within the classroom as well as in culminating events. And we also want community culture in the classroom. And that can look many different ways. And we're going to talk about each of these categories throughout the course of this module. Principles for culturally responsive teaching. Culture is central to learning. It plays a role not only in communicating and receiving information, but also in shaping the thinking process of groups and individuals. A pedagogy that acknowledges, responds to, and celebrates the fundamental cultures offers full, equitable access to education for students from all cultures. Some of the characteristics of culturally responsive teaching are: number 1, positive perspectives on parents and families; number 2, communication of high expectations; number 3, learning within the context of culture; number 4, student-centered instruction; number 5, culturally mediated instruction; number 6, reshaping the curriculum; and number 7, teacher as facilitator. Taking a new perspective. In this TED Talk, Jeffrey Tesorsis does an amazing job in approaching the topic of culturally responsive pedagogy and leadership from a new and fresh perspective. As you're watching the video, think back to what it was like for you to be in school. Were there opportunities when your teachers incorporated your culture into the lesson? Culture can be the music, food, and the languages you speak, amongst many other.
So, culturally responsive teaching is a pedagogy that recognizes the importance of infusing the students' cultural references in all of their learning. Right? We see it on a K through 12 level all the time. And we see teachers trying to make sure that their students are getting the key knowledge that adds their culture into it. We see it also inside the classroom as well on a college level. Brown University actually has a department focusing on culturally responsive teaching as an important aspect of student development. Well, my friends, I don't know if you could tell by the beautiful face that I put on for you today. I used some great moisturizer, but I've been working in student development and higher education for about 12 years now. And what I do recognize is as important and essential it is to be culturally responsive in the classroom, it is even more so to make sure that we are representing our students' cultural influences and their representation outside of the classroom. And what that means to me is that we have to have a conversation about student development and student leadership. I'm just going to give you a few items, a few tidbits, a few points that are going to help us understand what we need to do to better recognize how to do so. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is raising the level of your communication. We have to have authentic conversations with our young folks, and not just our young folks, but anyone who considers themselves a student. The conversations have to be not only authentic, but they have to be raised at another level. And for me, when I think about communication, the first thing that comes to mind is hip hop. I'm a hip hop head, grown up in that era, and the thing that I remember is a great DJ. If you've ever been to a party that had a terrible DJ, you already know what happens. The blending is not right, the sound is a little bit off, the DJ's not on time. See, culturally responsive leadership, because that's what we're going to be talking about, is saying we can be the DJs in the leadership spaces. That means we have to not blend the two sounds together or blend the two students together. That doesn't mean that we have to make sure that the party's always turned up. We have to make sure that our students are turning out into our spaces of cultural development every single day. See, I'm a hip hop head. I told y'all this. So another thing that I also love about hip hop and the original elements is graffiti art. And what I love about graffiti art is that graffiti art is this representation of colors when everyone thought it was only supposed to be black and white. Now, what does that have to do with cultural development and culturally responsive leadership? I'll tell you, we have to start diversifying our views. Our student leaders are not one color, one gender, one type of individual. For us to be culturally responsive and responsible as leaders, as educators, as students, you know what we have to do? We have to start getting our spray cans out and changing the colors, reaching the spaces and the places that you never thought you could reach. You ever see graffiti art? Sometimes it's moving across trains. Sometimes it's on the top of high towers and you wonder, how did they get those beautiful colors there? See, I told y'all I'm a hip hop head, and what I love about hip hop also is breakdancing. And see, breakdancing was a little thing in my house that we could not do because my mom, she's a Haitian woman that said we are not going to be breakdancing anything in this house. But they were the risk takers. For you to be a culturally responsive educator, you have to take a risk. You cannot be this individual that is stuck in your standard ways, thinking that I can just go in my merry way and be fine and dandy. You have to take a risk. You have to go to a place that you never thought you could reach. You have to go to a left when they always told you that right was the way to go. See, I told you I love hip hop and its importance and its relationship to culturally responsive teaching and education and leadership. And I can't say enough about the fact that I'm also an MC. When I think about culturally responsive leadership and its effect and its impact on communication, I always say, see, I was born in an era when crack was attacking blacks and rap on the map and quickly adapted to that, and hat to the back was cool in the city schools and nothing tougher than T, and I pity the fools, overzealous storytellers reciting their bars out of this world like Spike when he was Mars was going far into Boston across colors, and Mike Tyson was still nicer than all the others. It was a time when Buster was raw-rawing and Air Jordan was scoring often versus Boston. Satisfaction the way the Jacksons acted. Sam acted a crackhead but still made it happen. My versatile flow is like Jesse Michael and Bo, so you know that I must be hot. Words paint the canvas like I'm Basquiat. Now tell me now you ready or not. See, that's authentic. 16 bars. I still got some bars left. Don't get it twisted, y'all. But we've got to be able to have authentic conversations. See, the MC was somebody that was able to go off the top of their head or tell a story, because we need storytellers. We need to make sure that the important messages that are happening right in front of our face are moving along in history. We cannot be stuck in one space, and that's why the communication levels have to go up. See, can I tell y'all another thing about culturally responsive leadership? This is what I call trill EDU. We keeping it trill, right? When I talk about culturally responsive leadership, we have to start thinking about how do we reshape our leadership curriculum, the model for social change in leadership and so forth and so on. And the reason why I scoff a little bit about that is because that model was introduced in 1993. And there's nothing wrong with being introduced in 1993. But you know who else was also around in 1993? Sears. I'll tell you who else was the biggest and the baddest in 1993. Macy's. Blockbuster Video. The biggest and the baddest in 1993. And then all of a sudden, something happened. There was a reshape in the culture. And those places just weren't quite ready. And as educators, we have to be ready. We can't be those individuals that are stuck in the past, that have not innovated, right? Because innovation, my friends, it's oxygen. For you to truly breathe, to catch a breath, you have to completely be involved and be in love with the idea of not only embracing the past, but making sure that every step of the present and the future is paid attention to and evolving on a day-to-day. See, I'm from New York City. And as a New Yorker, things that are synonymous with my beautiful city are slices of pizza, the Empire State Building, rudeness. That's not true. That last part, that's just not true. But you know what's also synonymous with New York City? Are yellow cabs. And about 7 or 8 years ago, a New York City yellow cab was worth $1.3 million. That means if you wanted to drive a yellow cab in New York, you had to have $1.3 million. Today, my friends, 7 years later, it is worth $250,000. They got left. They got left. My father used to say, listen, if y'all are not downstairs by 8:15 a.m., y'all are getting left. And I used to say, no way we're getting left. We'll be all right. Every morning we went down there, my mother, my sister, and I, and we said, we'll be fine. We go downstairs, right? And then we'll be all good. Until that one morning, my mom took her time that day. And it was about 8:16. And I said, Mom, we are about to get left. And I lived in the hood, so the elevators were slow. And there was always a super trying to ask us, was the water still hot? So we gotta go. My dad's about to leave. I got outside, and that car was gone. And I first thought, man, I was like, what kind of parenting is this? I got to go to school in the morning. But then my dad played a trick on us. He pulled around the corner and said, I told y'all, at any time you can get left. And I said, whoa. That showed me, my friends, that not only could I get left by that car, but I can get left in any particular space that I occupy, and so can you. And that's why we must innovate. That's why we must continue to change. That's why we must continue to adapt to all the different things. Listen, I hear you. You may not be on Snapchat, or you may not be posting Instagram stories, but if you consider yourself an educator, you better understand what those terms even mean. You better understand what the new Snapchat update means to your students. You need to understand if your students are watching Netflix or not. But beyond all of those things, you need to understand the pains and the struggle that your students are going through. When students are telling you, listen, my pronouns are him or he or her or they, if you're not being culturally responsive, you know what you're doing? You're getting left. You have to understand from all points of walk. What does it mean to be leaders? To be change agents, right? Now, third thing that I always talk about, if you don't mind me going to my notebook, because I'm a writer, I'm a poet, so sometimes I like to keep my words close to me. And when I think about this last thing I want to talk to you about, I talk about redefining the definition of what it means to be an educator. See, you're an educator. There are people in this room that are my students. They're my educators. There are people in this room that are older than me. They're my educators. There are people in this room that I've never even met in my life, and they are my educators. You know what? They are also my students. And I'm also a student to them. We have to redefine the idea of what it means to be an educator if we truly want to be culturally responsive in our educational process. Everyone is an educator. That's what we call it the Trill EDU way. Everyone is an educator. But in the same regards, everyone is also a student. We're not in this space where we're going to live in these hierarchies where one person, because they have X amount of degrees or X amount of experience, is automatically the expert in every particular field. There are people that are way more knowledgeable than me, in science or the math fields, or maybe even literature as well, but there's spaces that we can all learn together, and that's what culturally responsive education and leadership is. Today, we always fight to figure out where can we find leaders. So often I have college students come to me and they say, Jeff, I don't know what to do after I graduate. Jeff, I can't find a job in my major. Jeff, I'm struggling to recognize what happens next. And I say, you know what? We didn't do a good enough job being culturally responsive to you. We did not prepare you for the innovations that are happening outside of your space. And that's what we have to do. If we want to change education, and my friends, that's what I'm here to do. This is not me having a conversation with you. This is me announcing the movement to reshape and change the idea of education. This is not just me announcing this movement, but I always go to my notebook because it has influences to me. And I go to this quote by one of my favorite people in history. You might have heard of her. She goes by the name of Harriet Tubman. And what Harriet Tubman once said was, "I grew up a neglected weed, ignorant of liberty, having no experience of it." I grew up a neglected weed. So many of our students right now are being neglected by educators who are not prepared to be culturally responsive. We have so many students that are ignorant of leadership because our educators are choosing not to be culturally responsive. But you know what I love about that quote is that although she was a neglected weed, although she was ignorant of liberty, somehow, some way, she made multiple trips, over 5 to 9 trips, back and forth to identify something she didn't even know existed. Imagine that. Imagine finding leadership, finding something that you didn't even know existed. You had no mindset of this thing in the future. But Harriet Tubman told you we're going to find freedom. So what we're going to do today is make this commitment to find leadership freedom, to find the existence that is going to push us to a space of cultural responsibility and responsiveness. This is where we announce the movement. This was day one, and there's many more days to come. So let's band together. Let's find what education truly means. Let's be culturally responsive. Let's innovate and find our oxygen. Thank you very much.
Things. It can stem from your family, friends, or even your neighborhood. We're going to move on to today's task, and that's figuring out your students' story. So this week, we're going to be spending a lot of time thinking of culturally responsive pedagogy and how it helps in the creation of a space that is welcoming for all of your learners. Today, your task will be to create an introductory survey for your class in which you ask your students questions to better understand their culture and their background. So again, we're trying to find out the culture and background of our students. And in order to do that, we are creating individual surveys. While you're creating your survey, please don't rush the process. Think about what you would have liked for your teachers to have known about you. Be sensitive in the way you are framing your questions. Remember, not every child has a mother or a father or a cookie-cutter family that is often depicted in mainstream media. Be authentic. Don't ask questions that you think that I, the facilitator of this professional development, would like to see you ask. Instead, ask questions with answers that you would genuinely like to know from your students. When you're done, take the survey and send me the answers so that I can learn a little bit about you at the end of today's lesson. I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with. And hopefully I learn a lot at the end of all of this, because you are my students and I would like to be culturally responsive in my instruction toward you as well. Having or not having. We're going to just look at our course progress. Today we finished lesson 1 with a learning target of I will be able to define culturally responsive pedagogy and explain 7 principles relating to its practice in order to create a student-facing survey. At the end of this week, just so you see what the overarching trend of learning is, you're going to be creating a mini lesson plan, but you're going to be utilizing the strategies and principles of culturally responsive pedagogy in order to do it. Throughout the course of the week, we're going to be looking at not only culturally responsive pedagogy, but we're also going to try to take a deep dive into equity versus equality and see what your thoughts are on that as well. Culture connections. Thank you for completing the learning portion of Lesson 1 in Module 3, Culturally Responsive Pedagogy. Please remember to create your survey on Google Classroom and share the answers with me. So I should be seeing 2 things. It can be within the same document as you're creating it. Create a survey with your questions, and then below it, answer those questions. So I should get your blank survey followed with a survey that has been filled out by you with your genuine, authentic answers. I'm really excited to learning some things about all of you. I've been running these professional developments for the past 2 weeks, and I have little to no idea as to who you are, where you're from, and what some of the things you may be. So please be willing to share that information with me, and I will try my best to embed it in the lessons moving forward because it is important. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to me at ray.badal@saya.org, or remember to text me. Also, CC your site director when you're sending those emails so that everyone's on the same page, and so that if by chance I don't respond immediately, I get a follow up from your site director. Thank you guys. Take care and have a great day.